Hi, welcome back to VME Vaginismus, Let's Name It Not Shame It. My name is Audrey Cairo, and yet again, I hope to leave you inspired and empowered by sharing someone their vaginismus journey with you. So yes, today I am speaking to the lovely Rosie. This is my second Rosie because funny enough, mostly when I meet people or started speaking to people, I always come across someone else with exactly the same name somewhere along the line. So it could be nice and confusing sometimes. But I recently came across one of the videos that Rosie posted where she openly shared her journey, her vaginismus journey, but mostly like the one that spoke to me was the one regarding her botox treatment for vaginismus. So I reached out to her because I was like, oh, like her message in that video was so powerful, and I felt that it was something that I would love to talk to her about. Or actually, I just wanted to just hear her story in general and get to know her a bit more and how she gotten to decide to do Botox too. So in this podcast today, Rosie, really, we're going pre-Botox, post-Botox, everything around it that has to do with our vagina / with vaginismus, beliefs that might have been formed in her past, but also like what it is that she learned along the way. So do have a listen and let me know what you think. Welcome, Rosie.
Hello, Audrey. Thank you so much for having me.
It's so great to have you. I am excited. And I think every podcast starts with how excited I am.
Every single one.
Every single one is like,
excited.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited. But I am, again, really excited.
Do you know what? It's so funny for me. And like, this is a nice moment for me because I came to a Vag Network event that you were speaking at. This was pre-COVID days.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was like front row, and this is the first time I had been to an event like really early in the days that I'd spoke to anyone about vaginismus at all. And yeah, I heard you speak and I just thought you were brilliant.
Oh,
so
because
you made me feel so much better just watching you speak at
oh,
all of us.
thank you.
And yeah, so it's really nice for me to be able to talk to you back.
Because I was like, because when I sent you a message and you said, oh, that you knew me through Vaginismus Network when we did an event, and I wasn't sure which one it was. So, but it was the first one that I did.
Was it?
Yeah.
Cool.
Like it
Yeah,
was the first one I
shush.
did. Yeah, it was the first one I did. And I was as nervous as it could be with my cue cards. And I was like, throw away the cue cards. I'm just going to talk and tell my story. Because when I saw you and everyone's faces, I remember being like, I'm so happy to be here because, oh my God, I never thought I would be in a room with
100%.
Yeah, like 30 people who who are who are or were me,
Yeah.
in a way,
Yeah. It
you know.
was so
And
refreshing. Like it was I remember that day just being totally a game changer for me because I just thought it walking there, feeling like you're on your own, and then leaving the building after the event and feeling like actually this is a whole thing. This
yeah,
is not just me.
yeah,
Um
yeah,
yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it? It's great.
yeah. It was amazing because I remember it was in the summertime with it, and I think I walked out with like almost, like air punching, like yeah, like out of the
Fist bump.
building, like fist bumping, like this was amazing. Like it was just because I never done anything like that before, I was asked to speak, and I was just really just being like, yeah, of course. And I was like, what am I gonna, and what have I, and like all my little inner criticky chat came. But
Yeah.
then I remember seeing everyone, I was like, oh, awesome. So I'm happy to have you here because now I know which one it was because I wasn't sure, because online you can not really spot. So we have reunited, and this time we can speak to each other. There's not a whole room of people behind you, or behind me. We're in our living rooms or whatever rooms we are in with our headsets, and let's hope that the microphone keeps standing while talking. Fingers crossed. Um, but welcome to V and Me podcast. I think, yeah, so for me, I've been doing this for a few months now. And for me, it's really important just to hear people's or to bring people's story into the world, really. And when I saw you, because I'm following you on Instagram, of course, and I was like, I recently saw the video and I was like, yeah, I don't
Yes.
know. There were all kinds of thoughts that came and a lot of questions that came. And it's not necessarily that I want to just go to that, but
Hmm.
I was like, oh, it would be so interesting to speak to you, because I think that part of your story would help others,
Great.
anyway, if it is what you shared in your video or whatever. But
Hmm.
it's, I was like, let's just maybe send a
Let's do it.
message to her and see what she says. So, but I've got a bit of, to start, maybe always with a bit of a start question. I went to your
Hmm.
Instagram and I, circled some things that I was like, oh, yes, this was beautiful. And I was like, oh, okay. So it doesn't necessarily, it's not like a big thing, but
Hmm.
there was something that you wrote that hit hard for me.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and this was maybe, I don't know, when you found out about vaginismus
Okay.
and you ended that, post with, I think I can now say with some certainty that I'm not a crazy lady. I am a woman whose body is an incredible machine. I'm a woman whose brain is trying to protect me just a little too well. And I'm not mad at her for that.
Uh-huh.
You know, I'm approaching this with love now, nothing less. Love and light, X.
Such a turning point for me that was because, you know, I think prior to that, I think a lot of us with vaginismus, we punish ourselves. We punish ourselves all the time. Certainly I did, as though it was sort of something that was my fault. Um, you know, whether or not that was because I was feeling bad for my partner or feeling bad for myself, or, and I found that really hard. And then, it got to a point where I just thought, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep telling myself that I'm broken, or that I don't work properly, or that I'm not like, and I hate using this phrase now, but that I'm not a good enough quote unquote woman.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't do what a woman is supposed to do. And I just thought it was getting me down in the end. And you just think, I've had enough of that. I've got to spin this around in my head, because otherwise I'm not gonna get anywhere. And I
Yeah.
was so heavily focused on progressing all the time. I was like, okay, I've got this goal and I need to get there, and I need to get there as quickly as I possibly can. Um, and because of that attitude, I wasn't progressing
Mm.
because I was putting so much pressure on myself. And so actually just recognizing that my brain's just doing what it thinks it's supposed to do. It's trying to protect me. For what reason, I still don't really know. But you know, I would rather go through this journey, because I've got to do it, right? What I've got to do this journey. So whatever way I'm going to do it, it's either frantic and sad and you know, full of despair, or I can look at this as a chance to learn about myself, learn about my relationship with my body, and like I said in that post, try to approach it with a little bit more love
Yeah.
for myself, rather than, I hate this, I've got to fix this as quickly as possible.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, what I would love to do within our conversation is almost work towards that and
Mhm.
maybe even beyond, because I know that this post wasn't the last post at all,
Oh no, that
right?
was quite early on, that
That was
post.
early on. Yeah, this is when you actually, I think, still anonymously were,
Yeah,
posting. And then, of course, I think last year, I think you showed yourself, you know.
that was a
Um,
moment.
yeah. So in a way, what would be great is just, so if I would say as a word that, like, what, like, if you think about one word that describes your current relationship with your vagina, not necessarily vaginismus, but with your vagina right now, what would the word be?
The word that immediately comes to mind is like complicated. You know, I don't feel these days so strongly on the negative side. But, you know, she's still not quite where I want her to be, quite not like behaving herself, shall we say. So it's complicated. And I think the deeper and deeper I get into vaginismus and all it entails and maybe all the possible causes that there are and all these things that I can do to help, therapies and yoga and all of this stuff, all that stuff, it's like there isn't going to be a linear route here. You know, there isn't going to be, here's the start, here's me going along, and here's me at the end. And I think it's going to be more of a rocky road than that. I'm going to take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 4 steps back. And it's going to be a bit more wild than maybe I thought it might have been, you know? So it's complicated.
It's complicated, you know? Yeah. like any relationships at times. Like,
exactly.
You know?
Exactly. And the realization that the relationship with my body to my mind is so complicated. You know, like how one day I might approach dilating and just be in a certain mindset or a certain mood and it go really well and go really smoothly. And the next day or a couple of days later, I'll approach with a slightly different attitude, you know, whatever's happened in my day even affecting that. And then it won't go how I had planned it to. And that's fascinating to me. And I've learned that, you know, through this. I didn't know that before, I guess, about myself.
So like if we work with that relationship of like complicated, there's the good, there's the bad, there's the ugly, there's the everything kind of thing. So can you take us back to like your, like, I want to say your younger years? I don't, just, you're still very young, so I don't know what I mean.
I was
with
younger though.
Yeah, exactly. The younger years before, because complicated might not have been the first word that was going on, right?
Yeah.
So can you tell us a bit more about when did you find out about vaginismus or about you and your body and all the stuff?
Yeah, so I would say, you know, for me, it's as long as I can remember ago. You know, it was like first coming on my period, trying to put a tampon in, the classic, not going in with the tampon. And, you know, I think that's relatively normal for kids to not be able to put a tampon in the first time. And I don't think I thought too much of it, really. I was kind of in the school toilet, you know, thinking this is probably not the best place to try and do this anyway. But one feeling that I remember really strongly was that it just made me feel really sick. Like I could almost have passed out in that toilet cubicle. Thankfully I didn't. And
not the best place.
Yeah. And I just remember being like, okay, that wasn't a nice experience, really. I'm going to leave that for a bit. Maybe try that again another time. And I think I did try again, maybe once or twice, and obviously had the same non-success with the tampon. And then I just thought, and I think some other people had told me, oh, you know, tampons don't work for everyone, so you just use a pad. And I was like, great solution. That's that. Didn't have to think about it again, really, for a while. That is until, you know, I started having more intimate relationships, you know, as I get into my later teen years, 16 onwards, whatever. And, you know, when you're that age and like everyone around you just wants to talk about sex all the time. It's hot topic, isn't it? When you're at school. And I just knew that the experiences I were having didn't sound like the ones that everyone else was having. Obviously, none of us know that because we've only got our own experience. I'm not going to be standing in the room where my friend is having sex with somebody. You know, I don't know what anyone else's sex looks like. I just have my own experience to go on. So I felt that something wasn't right, I was like, I don't think it's supposed to hurt this much, but maybe it is. Maybe this is what sex feels like. And I was confused about that. And so I kind of ignored it, I suppose. I kind of continued probably 16 to the age of like 20, that 4 years, just knowing it wasn't right, but not knowing whether it was or not. And I had partners as well that were either understanding or also didn't really know whether it was right either. I guess at that age, we're all just young and we're all just trying to figure it out, aren't we? And so no partner that I ever had sort of raised it to me either. I never had somebody else sort of say, this isn't going right, and perhaps they were just really nice people, not wanting to upset anything.
Like what was the like what 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 it's like me having question and having all kinds of questions at the same time. Like what were you experiencing? So what, because you said like painful, so were you able to actually have sex at that time, or was it not? Like what was going on at that time?
So penetrative sex was just not possible. And we would just try, it would be an awkward kind of attempt at it. And, I kind of, when you look back and you kind of like are embarrassed for your younger self, because I look back now and I'm just like, we were trying, like it was not happening, but we just kept trying. And, like I said, in the back of my head, I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is it, like maybe there isn't more to it than this. Or I thought maybe my vagina is too small or something, like maybe there's something physically different about me, that my vagina is too small, or they're too big to fit in me. Maybe we're just not compatible physically, or how your brain comes up with every excuse possible to try and reason it. And so it was painful when trying. It was like, the classic brick wall analogy, where it's just hitting a wall of muscle, isn't it? It's just like, doesn't feel great.
No
at all.
No. So when was then the first time that, because when you said from 16 to 20 or so, it was the trial and error type of moment, being like, nope, that doesn't go. And what you said, like you didn't know, they didn't know, no one knew. Like, and I recognized that as well. Which, to be honest, like in my mind, it was not necessarily a negative, because I was like, yeah, like just didn't happen, like kind of thing.
And do you know what? It like you saying that has made me sort of realize and think to say that, like, we were having a good time still. Like from 16 to 20, sure, that trying to do the penetration thing was awkward and fumbly, but the rest of it was fun. I was still a 16, 17, 18-year-old enjoying myself. So it wasn't, I don't look back on those years and think that was all terrible and it was all doom and gloom. I was still having fun. I was still, getting pleasure out of other things we were able to do, shall we say.
Yeah.
So in that respect, I definitely don't look back at those years and think, oh God, that was horrible or anything. But yeah, so when I was 20, I was at university. I think I was in my second year or something. And I had a new partner, and it was actually the first time that we tried to have sex with each other. And when you kind of, again, I think this was one of the first moments I can still remember the day, and I remember thinking, maybe this time with this person it will be all right. And I think maybe all of us can sort of have had a moment like that, where you kind of think, maybe this will just all go away with this person, maybe it will all be different. So I kind of went into it with that attitude, hoping that it would all go away. And it didn't. But what happened that time that actually made me think there is something wrong is that I actually bled a little bit. And so I was like, oh, and I saw physical blood, and I was like, oh, it took that, really. It took an actual physical sort of symptom to make me think, okay, this really isn't right. Like I'd suspected that it wasn't, but this, I know now that this isn't right. And so I was at uni and I just went to my campus doctor, and had an appointment, and she did an examination, which was obviously a bit unsuccessful and uncomfortable. And she was the first person to say, yeah, this might be vaginismus. And I was like, what on earth is that? Like, what on earth is that? Because I'd never heard of it in my entire life. I'd never even tried to Google what was wrong with me. I just left it up to fate, to just sort of just carried on stumbling my way along, hoping that one day it would sort of rectify itself. So that was the first sort of moment.
And how long ago is that now?
So I'm nearly 25 now, so that was nearly 5 years
ago. 5 years ago, yeah. So 5 years ago, the name vaginismus was introduced.
It was dropped into my world.
Yeah. And it's like, because like I had like a moment that I was thinking, oh, but what if the blood was, the first time moment,
right?
Like, oh, something had happened. We have like, sorry, I just have this Dutch word in my head that doesn't make any sense in English, but when you are penetrated for the first time, then blood can come in a way.
Yeah. What they call it, like popping your cherry.
Yeah, when your cherry got popped.
Exactly.
Yes.
And do you know what? That kind of crossed my mind as well, because I was like, when at that moment when it happened, I was like, oh, great. Almost. I was like, in my head, I was like, ding ding, there it is. Like, that's what we've been waiting for. And so, but then tried to continue, and it was still hurting, and it wasn't actually working. It was
no
bleeding. There was nothing else to it. So that's what prompted me really to go and actually tell a doctor. And I do wonder now, like, if I hadn't actually bled that day, for whatever reason that was, when would I have gone? When would I have actually, had a real talk with myself? Maybe it can be better than this, and maybe there's something that we can do to make it better. I wonder when I would have had that sort of penny drop.
It's funny because I'm like, you know what, you can think about it, but it happened. Like, the penny dropped at that time. And I'm almost wondering as well, because you said, not that we can go back in time, but you said you were like, maybe this is going to be different. So you wanted something to be different. So you were already somewhere. Like, it wasn't that you were being like, tra-la-la, this is so fun, I don't care, kind of thing. You were like, oh, I really like, maybe it's going to be different this time.
I was conscious. I was conscious of
exactly,
like, of wanting it to be improved in some way.
So you would have gotten there. That's exactly.
We hope.
Like, we, if we ever go back to the future, and if we do things differently again, we will figure that out.
We will.
Like, what would have happened if this would take this away?
Everything happens at the right time, doesn't it?
Exactly.
For you.
Exactly. So what did you then do? So when she said, oh, vaginismus, and you're like, what? Google, etc. What happened then?
So my immediate reaction was to leave the building and just cry. I was really upset, and I think purely because before going in there, I was dealing with an unknown thing, and coming out of there, I was still dealing with an unknown thing. Even though she told me what it was, I just had no idea. And I think in my head, I'd thought maybe there'd just be an easy fix for this. I thought maybe there's some kind of procedure I can have, maybe there's some tissue in the way or something that can just easily be removed or whatever. And, I was really hoping for that, because that would have been an easy solution. And it was almost like it was that dawning realization that this wasn't just going to be a simple solution and like a thing that I could again, a thing that I could fix quickly. Like,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
I think I came out of that appointment and was like, okay, well, maybe this is something I can fix in like a month. You know, maybe I can just go to the hospital, have one appointment, one procedure, and then I can carry on as normal. Yeah, and you know that I think I just had a dawning realization where I was like, it's not going to be like that.
yeah. No.
This might take a bit longer. Yeah, but the campus doctor was really helpful. She referred me to the hospital to have a procedure where they were going to check that physically my body was all good. So that was brilliant, because I went to the hospital. They put me under anesthetic, and then they put a camera sort of right up into my womb. And again, I was kind of hoping that when I came round from the anesthetic, they'd be like, oh yeah, we found this thing, and then we cut it out, and now you're all good. And obviously they didn't.
Fix. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just remember like coming round and the doctor being next to me, and me still being like way out of it, but him like being, yeah, you're all good. Your body's normal. You know, everything's in the right place and it's fine. And you know, obviously, you feel kind of bad being disappointed by that news, you know, because I'm really lucky to have a body where everything's in the right place and working as it should, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So it was that mixed thing of like, I'm really lucky to have this body. It's keeping me alive and it's doing what it should do, but also for
No, no worries. You can swear in this podcast.
oh,
It's
thank
okay.
God. Yeah, because I was just like, for fuck's sake, I didn't want you to tell me that. I wanted you to tell me that, you know, there was going to be this easy fix.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was set like mixed emotions from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I sort of had to have a follow-up appointment to that when I was, you know, a bit more in the room
Mm.
a couple of weeks later. And that was when he sort of told me that I had to use dilators. And I'd say that sort of moment was I can only say this in hindsight because at the time I didn't know anything more. But you know, I hadn't done any research on what I could do yet. I was hoping he would tell me, you know, what my options were. And it, you know, this is not his fault. I'm sure he just didn't have the information that he needed, but it kind of was presented to me that dilators were kind of the option. Like that was how you fix this.
Yeah.
And you know, this is why Instagram has been such a revelation to me and meeting other people, because suddenly I saw that people were having psychosexual therapy and physiotherapy on the NHS. And I was like, oh my God, I wish I'd known that. Like, I wish he told me that at that moment. Because I still haven't had those therapies, you know, and I now want to have them. You know, and I guess maybe I could have started off 5 years ago, but you know, I was fine. I went with the dilators and I was like, okay, this is what I have to do. But I got those really naff NHS
The one, like, to be honest, I've only seen them presented to me when you're like, oh, if you don't have vaginismus, you will look at them and you get vaginismus just looking at one of them.
Totally. I was kind of like, and again, like, praise Instagram for showing me other dilators.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
you know, that it's amazing how much that changes it.
Mm.
Amazing.
But what I understand is that actually from the moment that you found out about vaginismus, even if it wasn't anything bad or no bad intention, it was very much like, okay, in a very practical approach of, okay, we're going to refer you and we're going to have an examination and we'll see if you're completely okay. And okay, so everything's okay. So here are dilators. And it was very much of where I feel that the more people I hear speak about it, it's very interesting actually, because I thought, especially in the UK, that it had been very much like a psychological approach, which was different in your case. So it's interesting to hear that too, because since I've been here, I just keep on hearing, uh, we're going to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's what's so interesting to me now. Like, you know, with the benefit of hindsight, I am yet to have, 5 years into knowing that I have vaginismus and knowing about vaginismus and what it is. And I'm yet to have any standard talky therapy.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is what I'm just craving. Like that is what I need. You know, I took the dilators home from that appointment, and it almost frantically tried to get those to work, you know, completely with no guidance, you know, like no sort of method of how I could breathe or how I could make this sort of a positive ritual in my day or my week or whatever. For me, it was like, oh, I'm at uni, so I'm in lectures all day. Then I work in the bar in the evening from 7 till 2 a.m. But I've got to fit dilating in somewhere. So I was coming home at like 2 a.m. from my shift and thinking, oh, I better do it now then, like, because this is the only time in my day that I've got.
Yeah.
And I look at that now and I'm like, oh my God, like, you weren't going to, of course, you weren't going to get anywhere. You were tired. You needed to go to bed and sleep, you know, and rest. And like, I think when it's presented to you in such a clinical way, you know, and even the dilators look clinical and everything about it is clinical, you know, there's no kind of nuance about how you can make it positive and how you can maybe keep a journal or like light a candle or like maybe you can actually be aroused while you dilate. Like maybe there are ways that this can be enjoyable or pleasurable even, you
Yeah.
know, but it was presented in, it's like, nope, you've got to lie down.
I just want to
All the
say,
lights are on.
yeah, I just in the mind of like, here you got the dilator, the magical dilator. If you insert this, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Like you do this at a 2 a.m., 1 a.m. after you've done work, and you'll be okay. Like because there was no, like, what I understand, it would have been nice if there was a bit more guidance around
Yeah.
it, and maybe the reason of, or the understanding why.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something I've always kind of grappled with a little bit because I've never had a reason why.
Mm.
Um and I still suppose I don't really know how I feel about that. Because for a while I was like, I've got to know why, because maybe that's going to be the key to how to get through this. I need to find out why. Why is my body doing this? Why is my brain protecting me in this way? You know, like they're going too far.
Mm-hmm.
I'm grateful for the protection, but like rein it in a little bit, you know. And I've never had a reason why. And you know, when you do Google that, um, what I would often just read is from a bad sexual experience is why somebody might get vaginismus. And I was like, well, that's not me. So like, so what is it then? Like, what is it for me? Um, and I think that's something that's only really come over time.
Yeah.
It still hasn't come, but I feel like I'm starting to piece together my own little picture of
Yeah.
what it might be. And that's not through any conversation with a doctor or GP or therapist or anything. That's just me trying to piece it together by myself.
Yeah.
Um,
So what is it that you found out so far?
so one thing that was like really sort of stuck out to me was my horrible lack of sex education or any education about my body and and any education about pleasure. You know, it was kind of like, certainly in the school environment that I had, it was like if anybody found out that a girl was masturbating, it was like maximum shame was sort of placed on her. You know, I remember there was like a rumor that went around that this girl had put a Sharpie up her vagina, and everyone was like, oh, the Sharpie girl, like she's like, you know, and that kind of like went around the school like wildfire.
Mm.
And, you know, all I see now is like that was just a girl trying to explore her own body, trying to figure out what makes her feel good. and she was just shamed for that. But at the same time, you're aware that the boys are allowed to sort of wank 5 times a day or whatever they want to do. That's not a problem for them.
Yeah.
So I think that, that it's so hard to explain, isn't it, when it's a whole, just an environment. It's like an environment that doesn't foster exploring your body and women experiencing pleasure. Even to the point where I remember when I had my first orgasm thinking, am I wetting myself or something? Like, what's happening? I didn't know. How can I get to the point where I'm having intimate like relationships and not know what an orgasm is? And sometimes I think maybe that was me, not doing enough research. Maybe I should have gone on Google and done a bit, dug a little bit deeper. But as a child, I don't think that should have been my responsibility, maybe, or like, at least I should have had some guidance maybe from the adults in the world to sort of prepare me for that.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big factor for me.
Yeah. Like if you think of, because when I go back to Sharpie girl moment,
girl.
yeah, like, and you might not know, and it might be just a question, just throwing it out in the air. Like if you think of those moments, that because it's a moment in time that is in your mind, right? Where you're like, oh, I remember that was something. Like what beliefs do you think might have been created in that time for you? Like even if you don't believe in them now, but what beliefs might have been created in that time?
That like that that women partaking in anything like sexual was just a bit gross. Like I also remember people being like, I will never give a blowjob, that is disgusting. That whole kind of thing of like, oh, that's gross. Like, this whole shame sort of culture, this whole like, oh, she fingered herself, that's gross, that's really disgusting. It was that, I think that was my main takeaway, is like, this is gross. Maybe we all knew that adults did it, I suppose, but like, it was gross at that time for any of us to be doing that. And difficult, because that, that it's not gross for the boys to do it, but it was just gross for the girls to do it. That's how I think that is how I felt at the time. I was like, oh god, I can't be the next Sharpie girl, I can't be hairbrush girl or whatever I had to hand at that. No.
Anything that like represents,
that
anything.
wasn't an option. That wasn't an option. So I think I was probably, and this I know for sure, is that I let a boy explore my body before I'd explored my own body, and probably kept that up for quite a few years. Like, so I let, my partners, and they were my boyfriends, but I let them touch me before I let myself touch me. And the interesting thing to me is that now I still can't touch myself with my own hands. I have to use another object. Like, I have to, and I can masturbate now and I can enjoy that, but I have to use another object. Like, I have to use a vibrator or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is great. I'm not mad, but
no. But there's something interesting there. Like,
exactly. Yeah. There's something in the fact that I can't, like, it sort of makes me feel a bit sick if I touch myself with my own hands. So I just don't.
Yeah.
I don't do that. And it's almost like I know that that's probably actually going to be one of the key things for me getting through this, is like, that's something I've got to address. I think I can kind of feel that now. I didn't know that before. I didn't think that was important.
Yeah.
I thought it was just about getting a penis into my vagina. And that was like the big tick box,
that you're trying to tick. Yeah.
Exactly.
And because of course what you said, like, a belief that had been created consciously, unconsciously, right? Because we're young and
Hmm.
um,
Yeah, and now I can look and think, of course, how it's got to come. Do you watch RuPaul's Drag Race?
sometimes.
Because this always makes you think of RuPaul when he says, if you can't love yourself, how in the hell are you going to love somebody else? And always I just think, if I can't touch myself, it does not sound as poetic as RuPaul, but if I can't touch myself, how the hell can I let somebody else touch me?
Mm,
In that way, I think that's almost so glaringly um, obvious to me now, but
yeah,
that's
yeah,
only with sort of 10 years of hindsight,
yeah. But
Um,
like, do you feel that that belief is now today still very present in the not touching yourself part of like, so if you think about you touching yourself, even if we're happier for someone else to do it, like and even if it's old belief, I'm not saying that it has to
yeah.
be here, but I'm just wondering, is that still present or what is currently going on for you not to go there?
Yeah, it's almost like for me now it's just unconscious. And so consciously I am very much like I am completely flipped, I'm completely the other way. I've done my homework. I've read and I've realized that it's like that that it's not shameful. I know all of this, in my conscious mind. I know that it's not shameful. I know that like I would I know I would almost feel empowered by doing that. But it's like the the it's just so ingrained, I suppose. It's just set in. It's
Mm,
like I learned it when I was 14, but nearly, 10 years later, that belief is still just sort of ingrained. And I suppose when it's so like deep down, you've got to really dig to get it to come up. Um, and yeah, it's kind of like I know that it's something I have to work on. But even just trying feels exhausting, like a bit like dilators, yet when you have to really psych yourself up to give it a go, like
mm-hmm.
not knowing what the outcome's going to be and
Yeah,
whether it's just going to be a whole, waste of time or whatever.
yeah.
Um, so it feels like that. It feels like, oh, I know I need to do that. I know I need to do the whole thing where you get a mirror and all of that. And I'm just like, uh, I,
It's so funny. Like I'm just smiling and like nodding my head and being like, it is. And this is the thing. Like especially as if we think in that like neurologically in a way, like how
Mhm.
we are conditioned and what you said. It's been like 10 to 11 years now that there's a belief unconsciously that has been driving alongside of you being somewhere. If we think
Mhm.
about being intimate with ourselves, and then now knowing, like, and maybe now not believing it either, that means that if we want to
Wholeheartedly.
exactly, it's like, and if we now want to change it, it's like, oh shit, I have to do something. And
It's
then
like,
of
oh,
course,
you mean I have to actually like you mean I actually have to go and unpick that myself now? Like,
mm,
thanks world for like putting that in my head, and
mm,
now I've got to go through all the labor
yeah,
of clawing it back.
yeah. And the thing is, it's like maybe it's not even like, I wonder if it's clawing back or if it is what could be a new belief, right? It's like,
Hmm.
how can you install a new belief? Like, even though knowing that this belief doesn't necessarily work for you
Serve.
anymore, we know that that's maybe where we get a bit nervous or when we're like, oh my God, I'm going to do this and this gross and like all that stuff. But then it's like, oh, what is the belief I do want to incorporate? Well, if I would try, right? Like
Yeah.
instead of fighting against it, being like, because you're very conscious of it, and it will be more of like, oh, so it is going to be a bit of work, but it's going to be like maybe not necessarily overriding. It's maybe finding a new,
Yeah.
if I say it in technical terms, like neuro pathway or neurological
Sure.
pathway or whatever, you know,
Yeah.
and training your body in that, being like, oh, it is actually okay, you know, or maybe it could
Yeah.
be fine too, being like, I just don't like to touch myself. I like to, I like someone
I
else
like
to
to have
touch
somebody
me.
else do it.
Exactly. Come here.
I think I actually remember saying, once when I was a teenager, like, well, I've got a boyfriend, so I don't need to masturbate. Like, I don't
Mm,
need to do that because I have a boyfriend. That's what they're for, isn't it? Like, you know,
yeah.
I would never say that. The words would never leave my lips now, it's so not how I feel now.
Yeah.
But
So if I will ask you such a coaching question, really such a coaching question, Audrey, I'm just hearing myself like, what? It's like, well, I'm gonna do it. Like, what is the belief? Like, what? Mm, if you can turn, no, let me just say it differently. If you can come up with a new belief, like, what would it be?
hmm, that's hard because I think that's about 100.
But
It's
but regarding you touching yourself,
um I think my new belief would have to be that, like, my body is brilliant and amazing. Like, because I think a lot of the old outdated belief is that it's gross, that like vaginas are just quite gross. Like, they're gross to look at. They feel gross, putting Sharpies in them is gross. You know, it's I think that would have to be my new belief, is that vaginas are wonderful
I feel I have to write
things.
this down.
Please write it down and then just like plaster it on the walls.
Is this? But yeah,
Vaginas are great.
vaginas are great, or vaginas are wonderful, or my body is great.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting because like that's the belief what you said that you would want to like that, like, you know, that's what you would maybe want to turn it into.
Mm-hmm.
And if I would coach you right now, for example,
Mm-hmm.
that's like, how could you create that? Like, how could you view and see your body as great? What do you want to do for you to feel and see your body or your vagina as great? Right? Because
Mm-hmm.
then you're moving towards that instead of trying to
Yeah.
diminish that old belief you had about it's gross. I want to walk away from it's gross. Blah, blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So even though there are, of course, so many different ways when you said, like, look at your, like, because, you know, I do this whole thing that, yay, you know, but it's not, that's maybe I should do less sound effects, but I do this whole thing where it is like looking at it with a mirror or whatever, creativity. But there are so many different ways, like for yourself.
Uh-huh.
But what you're saying now about, I want that belief to be that my body is great. So that will be what comes
What could
next.
I?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like what would it be for you to feel that your body is great? That might not necessarily only be by touching your shell self, or
Mm-hmm.
that might be in different other ways, right? But it's more about you feeling that your body's great, because that's likely not what you have been feeling at
Yeah.
times.
Yeah. God. It's hard to even think how I would approach that, you
It's a
know?
bigger question.
It's so big of a question.
That's the reason why
Like,
wanted to write it down, so that
yeah.
after the session I can almost give you homework.
Yes. A little homework. Yeah, it's so big a question, isn't it? Because I guess it's like when you've just reached the stage of um of acknowledging that there is a question to be asked, I feel like it's only in recent times that I've realized that there is a thing to be done. Um and there's probably been there's been a whole process to get to that point. And I suppose there'll be another process to get me to figuring out what it is I need to do that, or what it is that will what it is that will cement that belief into my mind. Um, and I figure it out sort of day at a time. Tiny little drops of information, all sort of pooling together.
Yeah.
Um, gradually gets me there.
Yeah.
Because I've sort of come round to, I'd say only in the past year, of like how much sort of like bringing like mindful practices into my life actually does for me. You know,
Mm.
it's wild. You know, I think pre a year or so ago, I'd been like, what's that going to do? Like, what's that actually going to do for getting something into my vagina?
Yeah. Yeah.
That sounds like writing down on a piece of paper. That doesn't sound like that's going to help. But I think I'm starting to realize the value in that. And so I think, and also, you know, for me, that will mean I seem to have this complex sometimes where like dilating or whatever it is I'm trying to achieve that day is almost just like a waste of time if it doesn't go right. You know, but I think if I journal it and I write it down and then I can flick through the pages, it's part of something, you know. It's not just an alone, like one isolated attempt at something that didn't go well and I was like, well, that was fucking crap. Like, pardon my language, but like it will be part of like, oh, but on that day it was crap, and then those 2 days it was really good, and then it was crap again, but then it was good for 4 days and then it was crap again. You know, I think it'll make it feel like part of a whole,
Yeah.
rather than just one rogue attempt at putting something in me
Yeah.
and it going bad.
And I was like, oh, have you by any chance seen my little thing that I put up today where I said there are no failures, just experiences. And
I think I liked it actually.
And your reaction to them. It's not my quote, of course.
It's Googled
it and I found it. But that's the thing. Like, I think what I like, the reason why I'm doing what I do is simply because I notice where that conversation that you're having with yourself after the dilation, or that conversation that you're having with yourself with the beliefs and stuff, like, and that's where we sometimes just get in a bit in a loop, right?
Yeah, that's me all over.
And you've done all kinds of different steps, and you've been and you've even gotten 2, 3, 4, 5 steps further than that too.
Yeah.
Where I do want to go back here, because I think that's something that I don't hear a lot of people about, and because at one point I almost want to, I wonder how you got there. That's one. But I also am curious of like, whoa, you know, like, ooh, Botox, the topic of Botox. Yeah, the B word. Because I remember you created your video, you discussed as well about having gone through that. But how did you come to decide to do Botox?
So it was quite literally, I think, a place of almost like desperation to you know, I was still in that phase of I've got to fix this. And I'd actually just had hypnotherapy. You know, I'd sort of done my dilators, failed at those completely. They weren't doing anything. So then, you know, because I didn't know that there was stuff available in the NHS, I just went to Google and found this hypnotherapist. She was a lovely lady, but the hypnotherapy didn't do anything. It didn't work. You know, despite her sort of thinking it had worked, it really didn't. And I'd spent quite a lot of money on those sessions. You know, thankfully had the privilege of still living at my parents' house, and I had a job, so I had some spare money. So I just spent all my spare money on this hypnotherapy, and it didn't do anything. And after that, I was just like, oh God, like I can't go through all of this again. You know, I was like, I can't go through 12 more sessions only for nothing to happen at the end of it. You know, and I thought I just need something that's going to guarantee me a result, which, like, you know, now it wouldn't be my attitude at all, but then I was like, I just need something that's gonna actually physically do something. And that's where sort of Botox was sold to me, because it was like, here's a physical thing that we can physically put into your physical body
and
you know,
fix it.
Yeah, it was that for me. And so I found the clinic, and I really researched the guy, the doctor. I had multiple family friends who work in like the medical field. Check this guy out, make sure he wasn't some cowboy who just got his hands on some Botox on the internet or whatever. Yeah, so I properly researched this. So I was comfortable that I wasn't sort of just like I was aware that my decision was slightly more rogue, you know. I was aware that Botox was a bit more of a a bit more of a wild decision. But I was happy to go with it. And again, I just saved up the cash and I just
Yeah.
thought, at least I know this is going to do something.
So, so for anyone who doesn't know what that Botox then means, like, could you describe, like, you don't have to go into like crazy details, but
Yeah.
maybe you can actually. I don't know. I'm just gonna leave
Yeah.
that up to you. But
Yeah.
what does Botox entitle?
So basically, it, like if you got Botox injected into your face, it freezes those particular little muscles. Um, so in the vaginal walls, it's injected into those walls, and it stops them from having that reaction. You know, it stops them from clamping shut because they're sort of frozen.
Hmm.
Um, and you know, I guess that doesn't mean that you can't control your vagina at all. But it just kind of, I guess, freezes them enough that they don't have that immediate reaction. And then the idea is the Botox only stays within your body for like 6 months, like it would in your forehead. You have to go get it topped up, except you don't have to go get it topped up. The idea is that after you've had the surgery, you then dilate. So use dilators for, I think they said between like 6 to 8 weeks. You should then have trained your brain to know that it's okay for something to be inserted into you. Um, and then by the time the Botox is worn off in 6 months' time, you're already cured because your brain knows now that this is okay.
So, but was that also true for you?
Yeah. So it what do you mean in that did it work? Like
Yeah,
did it?
because when
Yeah.
they say like after 6 months you do your dilating,
Mm-hmm.
and then you should have trained your brain.
Mm-hmm.
That's what that was the reason for Botox in a way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And this is where it gets so complicated because it did work. So pre Botox, I could not do a single dilator, like not even the smallest one. Um, Post Botox, I can. So physically, it did its thing, and this was a bit over 2 years ago now that I had it, and I can still insert my dilators. So, you know, it did do what it said it was going to do. Um, I guess the thing that I just did not anticipate was what it wasn't going to do. Um, and what it didn't do at all was fix my psychological state. Um, Basically, you have to have like an after appointment. And for me, this part was really important because it really hit this realization hit me like a ton of bricks because um so I'd had the procedure. It was fine. They put you to sleep, by the way. You are not awake because that would just not been possible. And yeah, so 2 weeks later, I also had my a hymenectomy at the same time. So I knew that my hymen was still intact. So they were able to remove that,
Okay.
which was a good thing because that kind of took a bit of anxiety away. But yeah, so I went back 2 weeks later, and the guy had told me to bring my dilators with me, so I did. And so obviously, I guess I kind of expected that we'd be doing something with the dilators, but I didn't know exactly what. And I got in the hospital, you know, those the chair bed things. What are those? I laid in that, and he was like, "Okay, we're going to try and put the dilators in now, to check that the Botox has worked." And I was like, "Okay." Obviously, like I'm sort of panicking already because even if and I'm thinking at this point, like even if they do go in, right, I'm still really panicked about this, you know. And so he put the first dilator in, and like bearing in mind, I've never put a single thing in my vagina pre this moment. um and he put the first one in, and it just went in. It didn't really hurt. I was obviously uncomfortable with the whole situation that I was in. And then he got the second one, and he put the second one in. And I was like, you know, this whole time I'm just getting more and more sort of panicked, really, just about us. It's really the only way I can explain it, just panicked. And then he got the third one and put the third dilator in. And, you know, you just think this is all happening too quickly for my brain to process, like, what is happening. You know, my body was fine. My vagina was fine. I wasn't in pain. At least I don't think I was in any pain. From what I can remember, it's kind of a bit of a blur now, that bit. But yeah, I was so panicked, and then I think he went for the fourth one, and I was just like, I've had enough. Like, I can't do anymore. And the nurses were lovely, and she sort of just like gave me loads of water and was like, you know, trying to help me sort of calm down. But yeah, so it was kind of that moment really where it hit me like a ton of bricks that, like, I'm fixed, but I'm not really, because I still am reacting in the same way as I would before. You know, my body has changed, but my brain hasn't. None of my thought patterns are different, or none of my anxiety has gone. None of what I expect sex to be like has gone.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was kind of the thing of like, oh, well, there's still work to do here. And I think I'd sort of sold Botox to myself really as this like one-stop shop, like it was going to fix everything. And yeah, and then this sort of just became clear in the weeks following it. Like, oh, I remember I got home after that appointment where he'd put up to the third dilator in me, and I got home and I was like, well, that was a bit stressful, but okay, we did that. That's good that he put 3 dilators in me. Great. And then I went to do it myself. Could I get the first one in? No. And it's almost like, I got quite upset then, because I was like, oh, like, how comes he could just do it when I'm in that like super anxious scenario? You know, I'm in that hospital chair bed thing, and there's all of this going on, and he managed to do it, and now I'm here just in the comfort of my own bedroom and I can't do it. And so it did take a bit of time, and eventually, I would say probably about 8 weeks later of dilating, I managed to have penetrative sex. And I was like, oh my God, like, whoa, what the hell just happened? I wasn't really expecting it, to be honest. I wasn't really expecting it to work, I suppose, because nothing had until now. So yeah, it worked. And then I was like, okay, great. And it didn't last very long, because it basically started, it was almost like my body was here. My body was in one place and my brain had to catch up. And as soon as my brain caught up to what was happening, then it started becoming uncomfortable and painful, and I wanted to stop.
Okay.
So it was like that time. And then I tried 1 or 2 more times, and it was the same. It was like, we'd, you know, it would probably go in for 20 seconds before my brain caught up. And then it became uncomfortable again. It was like, oh God, I have to stop now.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, it was really in those weeks post Botox that I was like, oh, this hasn't done anything for my mental state about vaginismus. It's not changed that. And I wish I'd just been prepared for that. Like, and you know, when people ask me like, would you recommend having Botox? I'm like, I can't say that it didn't work. I can't say that, because it did. You know, it did what it's supposed to. It said on the tin. Says on the tin. Yeah. It did that. I just wish that I'd been more prepared for what the reality of what it was going to do, and what it wasn't going to do.
Yeah. So the same as with the dilating, like, you know, like, again, a kind of mental manual. Yeah. Because when I heard that video, or when I saw that video, and when I listened, and I literally was like, I don't know, I didn't have words for it, because I sent you a message straight after, didn't I? Um, but I was like, you made such a point because it's like, oh, I'm so happy that you're sharing that because the body mind connection is so important. And like for you, like it's, you know, there might be other people who are having who had Botox and everything was completely groovy, right? Like everything
Yeah.
was
Oh,
fine.
for sure.
And I'm
Yeah.
sure that there's lots and lots of stories of that. But I think that the preparation of what you said for the first time someone enters your body, which was on the table while after Botox, and having that click of holy smokes, like just because that's not really, you know, like I remember myself when I went to my GP for the first time saying, hey, there's something wrong with me. And he's like putting the gloves on and like, okay, let's have a look. And I'm going to stick two fingers in. And I'm like, you know, like I can't even I can't even finish the story of how I felt at that time because,
Mhm.
you know, all my other intimate moments with people who I wanted to have this, it never worked. And then it becomes so, you
Yeah.
know, yeah. So and that's like I think besides vaginismus, like regard like besides of what it is that might have caused vaginismus, all these moments are little mini like traumas anyway,
100%. Yeah.
right?
I definitely look at that moment and like I find it hard to define. I suppose it is, but sometimes I feel bad, you know, almost saying that was traumatic because I'd agreed to it all, you know. I was like, I knew what I was getting myself in for, I suppose, you know. Like I said, he told me to bring my dilators, and so, you know, I should have expected that we were going to be doing something with those. But I think maybe I'd thought that I'd be putting them in myself and they would be sort of guiding me, or something a bit more gentle. It didn't feel gentle. It didn't feel like it didn't it felt like, and I suppose again this is what it is, it felt like a medical check checkbox
Yeah.
rather than a holistic view of what vaginismus is, and what it entails, you know. And it should have been that for me. It needed to be more rounded, and think about how this is going to make me feel, not just, you know, this is a vagina, this is, we're going to put something in it.
Yeah,
How is
yeah,
that going to make me feel? um
yeah,
and that's what I just hadn't considered, and I felt that's just what's missing from the Botox experience. But you know, that's why now I'm just sort of, I'm in that place where I need to have that psychosexual side addressed, you know. That's why I need to go and have that therapy now.
yeah.
um but yeah, I just totally had not prepared myself for that side of it.
Mm.
And I think it's just never, it's not sold as that because that probably wouldn't sell it. You know, it's, let me add, it's like, it's fucking expensive. It's so expensive. And like, you know, again, I made this desperate sort of choice to spend the money on that. um and like I said, I don't like to think that it was a waste of money because it did something. It
Mm.
did something. It changed. You know, I now believe, where I didn't before, I now believe that I can put my dilators in, I'm not going to be in any pain. I can believe that now. So it did that.
Mm.
But, you know, for the cost,
Mm.
um, you know, both monetary and psychologically, you know, you have to weigh that up. You have
Yeah,
to weigh that up, whether that's worth it.
yeah.
Um,
And that's where like which is what I said, like hearing so many different treatments or in different places,
mm,
and like where normally over here in the UK where there's then the let's talk about it and stuff, where sometimes I feel we're talking about it too much and not really doing anything at times, like not
yeah.
knowing our bodies at all.
Mm-hmm.
We talk, and but then still not having made that body mind connection
Mm-hmm.
with ourselves. Or what you said, this was maybe the flip side. This was the doing the different things and like the examination, the Botox, but then not talking about it. Where it sounds there is what you say, having that leveling it up,
Yeah,
having that balance between the two of
totally.
where I really believe in um like knowing both your body and your mind,
Yeah,
you
and
know,
maybe
like,
that's maybe that's sort of a thing that maybe that's where Botox could be really different. What if it was a package that was offered, you know, where it was like you can have the Botox and then for 10 weeks you have a weekly psychosexual therapy session.
Yep. Or the other way around.
Yeah, yeah, or just
Yeah.
something. I don't
Yeah.
know. Like it
Yeah.
just needs to be, you know, it needs to be reimagined. I think.
Yeah. Well, I
Maybe,
think with psychosexual therapy, like general, you will have the conversation, and then you will also go through the
yeah,
dilation, and you likely go through that process then too. So that is technically there, but I think it's really more what you said. Like, is it like what is it that you need from the Botox, and what is it that you need from psychosexual therapy? But what you said, you hadn't put one on one next to each other in a way, because this is something
yeah.
physical, you
And
know.
this reminds me as well that I guess when I was in quite a sort of naive place about vaginismus, you know, having Googled what causes vaginismus, oh, bad sexual experience. Okay, well, that's not me. So I don't need therapy. That's what I believed. I thought, well, you know, what am I going to get out of
Mm,
psychosexual therapy? Because nothing bad has happened to me.
mm,
So, you know, and I find that really interesting now because, you know, now I can see all these ways that it might benefit me.
mm,
And yeah, and back then I just thought therapy was for somebody who could pinpoint a moment in their life that things changed for them, or
mm.
you know, could go back to a particular time of their life that they could talk about.
Yeah,
And I was like, well, what am I going to talk about?
yeah. All the other times that came after, that's what I hear. You
You
know,
know,
yeah, like not maybe the time of what might have caused vaginismus, but all the other experiences that have happened during you finding out having vaginismus.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
Right, and that's
yeah,
that's where I hear that you are at. It might not, because it's like
totally.
that's
Yeah,
yeah.
I have like, I feel like I have new realizations almost like weekly at the moment. You know, like last week it was, and I can't believe I hadn't put two and two together on this one before. And again, it was only from listening to somebody else mention this and me going, like, my brain just clicking into place, that like I had such issues when I was a teenager with thrush all the time. I had like um every month after my period, I don't know, I still don't know why this was what was causing this, but I would have that after my period every single month. And when, you know, when we're talking about just trauma in the pelvic area of your body, that is an enormous trauma. And that at the time was so horrible for me. Like, you know, it was relentless. It was every single month. It was painful, you know, it's uncomfortable and just horrible. And I hadn't really ever thought that that might have something to do with it. And you know, now I'm just like, that's got to that's got to have had something to do with it.
Yeah,
That's,
yeah. Rosie, how has this all shaped you as a person?
oh God, it's like it's so much a part of me now, isn't it? I suppose. Like, I think I was thinking about this today, and I was thinking, if I ever, and I certainly hope I will, but if there's ever a day where I don't have to think about vaginismus anymore, or like, and that's not to say that I obsess over it. I don't, but you know, it's a concern that I have in my life. And one day when it's not, like, how will that feel? You know, it's kind of like, how do, I don't know how it feels to not think about this. You know, um, and and that having something that's that constant in your life does shape you, doesn't it? And I think what it's really done is just posed a lot of questions to me, perhaps things that I might not have questioned otherwise, you know, like questioning my relationship to my body, questioning, you know, the sex education I had, and questioning like the world a little bit more, um,
Mm,
how certain things have made me feel, and, you know, how I feel about my own body, and how I feel about sex, and how I think sex should be now. Like, what's good for me, what's not so good for me. um And I think that's all really valuable information for me now,
Mm.
and like I wonder if I would have asked myself all those questions. I wonder if I would have like put pleasure as such a priority for me now rather than penetration if I hadn't had this experience. I wonder if I would feel that way,
Yeah.
or whether I would just sort of go through the motions.
Mm.
And I think one thing that vaginismus has done, it's certainly forced me not to just go through the motions with sex. There is no blueprint, there is no like, this is what we do, we start, we go, we finish. It's made me think about it so much more, and maybe prioritize and figure out what I actually want,
Mm.
rather than what I think I should get. you
Mm.
know yeah, I think that's probably the biggest way it could have shaped me, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
maybe made me, sorry, just to add
no,
to
no,
that,
no, no, that's okay.
I think just made me more of an open person, I think, which may sound unusual because I think maybe sometimes with vaginismus it can make you close up, which I completely get. I completely understand that. And certainly for that 16 to 20, that 4-year gap where something was wrong, but I don't know. I think I closed up then because I was like, I don't have a word to explain. I can't explain this, so I'll just deal with it. But certainly post diagnosis and all of that, I'm far more open with my experiences, and what's happened as a response to that is that I might have opened up to a friend who has then come back to me and said, oh, like, thanks for telling me that. Actually, I've had this experience that sounds a bit similar. Or, oh, I've never experienced that, but my God, I really have trouble with this thing.
Mm.
And, and it's kind of opened that dialogue with the people in my life about what they're going through. And, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's really nice. And maybe that's an exchange that we wouldn't have had, or, it's made us both feel more comfortable to talk about the uncomfortable things.
Yeah. 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 Ah, so like it's yeah.
Double whammy, I suppose.
Exactly. Exactly. But as you know, like because I feel like I'm like, so much every time I say this, like I can stay on the call for
Yeah.
ever. But then, how much can people stay on the call for too?
Yeah.
But maybe another time, another thing, another topic. But I always ask in the end, just for you to say is like, what do you know now that you wish you knew then?
What I know now, I think it's kind of a combination of two things. I think it's that pleasure is far more important, and to not ever let go of that in favor of penetration. That's huge
Mm-hmm.
thing. And secondly, I think that's equally as huge for me is that I'm not broken. I'm not a broken piece of machinery that needs like oiling up. I don't need to be in a frenzy of trying to fix something. And nowadays I almost don't like saying that I need to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that I don't want to change things one day, but I don't feel the pressure now of needing to fix it.
Mm.
And that just feels so much more relaxed. It's like I said in the beginning, if I'm going through this journey anyway, why make it a painful one if I can actually maybe make it a slightly pleasurable one?
Yeah.
I would take that option
Yeah.
every time.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's those two things for me.
Yeah. And do you have any top tips for any of the listeners who are, because you already given like the tips, if we think about like the Botox part of, like not just like, even if Botox works, it's not just the Botox. It's not just about the muscles and looking after the muscles. It's also looking after the mind and the mindset. So any other tips that you want to share?
Any other tips? I hope this classes as a tip, but a massive thing that's changed my sort of whole trajectory of where my vaginismus journey was going is talking to other vaginismus people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like to say sufferers either. Yeah, but that's just really opened like a million doors of possibility for me, because
Yeah.
you only have your own view of what vaginismus is and how you can fix it and all of this, and talking to others just opens a whole realm of possibilities that you didn't know were there, maybe, or that you hadn't considered, might lead you to realizations that you didn't know you could have.
Mm.
And that's just been such an eye-opener to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that it's just sharing it, because it's one thing sharing it. I had shared with my friends and my family and any people that I was close with, but it's another thing sharing with somebody who really, really knows what's going on, really understands what it is. That's a whole different, both things are supportive, but that's just a whole different kind of support that's available to you if you just, and it's a brave thing to do, to open up to a stranger that's
Mm-hmm.
probably going to be a stranger, because we're hard to find in real life, aren't we? But it's hard to open up to a stranger, but maybe it's easier than opening up to somebody who's close to you. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Or let's say
Yeah.
one is maybe is it a catalyst? Or is it one is maybe the catalyst for the
Yeah,
other?
yeah,
You know?
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Open your mouth.
Yeah.
Open your
Like
mouth
to
and
start
just,
talking. Yeah.
yeah.
So to start talking at least about it. And if it is with someone you know, or if it's with someone who knows or feels your pain in
Yeah,
a way, it could be a hell of a lot easier at times.
so much,
Yeah.
so much
So
easier.
so as a last one, I'm gonna throw you a sentence and I'm gonna ask you the first word that pops into your mind. Yeah?
It could be anything. I'm warning
It
you.
could be anything. That's completely fine. Because let's end this with on a high and I don't know what it could be. It could be comedy, you know?
Okay,
Um,
it could be comedy.
so you are not vaginismus, but you are
Pleasure. That's the
mm,
first word that came into my head.
yeah.
I can be a pleasurable person. I can experience pleasure. I can deliver pleasure. I am that pleasure.
You are pleasure. Yes. So you are not vaginismus, but you are pleasure. And I
Yes.
think that anyone who's listening could also apply that to themselves. And hopefully they have been able to pick up like some, like I think for sure, like you will be bringing so much to people by sharing your story, as we said
That's the
anyway.
hope, isn't it?
Yeah.
If it's just like, I guess I've experienced that myself, just listening to somebody else and getting one little nugget of information that makes you think, oh,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
like me, or you know,
Yeah.
that's what
So
we hope.
so if people want to find like what I said, like I looked at your or at your Instagram, I looked at the videos that you've created and stuff, like where can they find you?
Just on Instagram. It's my little Instagram account. It's called Vaginismus Who, and
Mm-hmm.
the name of that I originally was like it, because when I read it now, it sounds a bit weird, but when I made it, I just wanted to sort of spread a bit of awareness about vaginismus, and so in my head it reads like Vaginismus Who, because it was people who are like, who vaginismus, who is she?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's lovely actually, because I've made a little I've got like a really nice group of people on there, and it's feels like a really nice like place of the internet to be now,
Mm-hmm.
which is really nice, and kind of a thing I didn't really anticipate.
Yeah.
I started writing posts actually because it was quite like therapy for me to write something down
Yeah.
and just put it into the ether.
Yeah.
um
And then
so
people
that's what I
start coming
did,
back.
and then people read it, and I thought, oh god, there's a lot of people reading about my vagina.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Yeah. So if you're listening and you want to reach out to Rosie, you want to be part of her nice like little group and cozy group of people because there are quite a lot of people there anyway, but just
There
to
are
hear more
easily.
exactly. But as well for people to see your story and to hear your story and to maybe learn even more about the journey you've been in, or the journey you've been on, I'll say.
Yes.
So go to Vaginismus Who on Instagram, and I'm sure she's happy to hear from you.
Yeah, that'd be
So,
amazing.
but I'm very, very like, because we're gonna end it somewhere, but I've been really, really like, it's been great to have you and
Oh,
just to
right back
hear,
at you.
yeah, and to hear more. And
I'm really grateful to you that you're doing this as well, because like I said, it's like all it takes, if one person listens and has like a little eureka moment, like that's what it's about, isn't it? It's and the more of us that do this, the more
and
of us
say
that
it out loud.
talk,
Yeah.
then the more little eureka moments happen.
And the more it becomes normal, and
Exactly.
the more that it becomes uh
Not a brave thing to talk about.
exactly. But also, I think for all the professionals out there, like even you sharing your story about, hey, if someone is approaching you with vaginismus, this is also what could be needed. Like, it's not just the
Please think about
vagina, it's the whole person. If you think the body and the mind of what, like, and it doesn't mean that anyone has done anything wrong
no,
in your situation,
not at
but
all.
it's more about like the process about it in general, like of what it represents. Thank you so much for joining
Thank you.
today.
Thank
And
you, honestly.
no, thank you. And I will say to everyone else, I hope to speak to you soon again, or I hope you enjoyed it, or I will just edit this again when I get to that point, because hey, I always mess the end up anyway. So this was the VME podcast, Vaginismus, Let's Name It, Not Shame It, with Audrey Cairo. Don't hesitate to reach out or to connect on Instagram on Let's Call Her V, or find all my other details on audreycairo.com. Thanks for listening.